What's happening, everyone? Steve here, Cars with Steve, and today we're doing another head-to-head comparison. This time taking a look at the Ford Escape, comparing that with the 2021 Ford Edge. So this is going to be an exciting video, looking underneath the hood of the vehicles, checking out the cargo dimensions, spacing, and things like that. If you enjoyed the content, give it a thumbs up, think about subscribing, but let's have a little bit of fun and see what the size differences are between these two vehicles. Taking a peek underneath the hood of the Escape. So, a few things to point out. We are looking at the 2.5-liter Atkinson hybrid engine that's available in the Escape lineup. On top of that, the Escape also has a 1.5-liter or a 2-liter engine that's available. Those are both turbo engines, depending on which trim level of the vehicle that you go with. So, when it comes down to a power perspective, the hybrid engine is going to be able to push out 200 horsepower and 155 pound-feet of torque, while the 2-liter turbo is going to push out 250 horsepower and 280 pound-feet of torque, and then the 1.5 is going to be able to push out 181 horsepower and 190 pound-feet of torque. Taking a peek underneath the hood of the Edge, we do have two available engine choices, either a 2-liter or a 2.7-liter turbo. Now the 2.7-liter is only available in the Edge ST. Now this one is the Edge ST line, so it's got the look of the Edge ST, but it's only got the regular 2-liter turbo engine. From a power perspective, the 2-liter is going to be able to push out 250 horsepower and 280 pound-feet of torque, while the 2.7-liter engine is going to push out 335 horsepower and 380 pound-feet of torque. When it comes down to some things that we can do underneath the hood, as you can see there, we can easily top up some fluids if we need to. We can check or change our oil, and we've got easy access to the battery if we ever need to give anybody a boost. When it comes down to standard technology inside of the Escape, at a very minimum, you're going to have a backup camera. You're also going to have a blind spot system, so it lets you know if anybody's entered the blind spot on either side of the vehicle, and the vehicle is also going to have a lane keeping system. Now, there are some extra features that are available and going to be optional depending on which trim level of the vehicle you're looking at. So if we're looking at the Escape SEL, as you can see in the back there, we do have a reverse sensing system. The SE version of the vehicle does not have that standard, but you can add it on as an option. Now, when we compare that to the titanium version of the vehicle, the titanium would also have a forward sensing system that would come as a default as well. So the features and options that you get are going to be based off of the vehicle that you look at. Now, when it comes down to filling up fuel inside of the Escape, very straightforward. So along our driver's side door, we've got a little cutout there. So if we're in the hybrid like this one is, it's actually locking, so we can't open it up without pressing the inside there. If we were in one of the regular gas engines, this is not a locking cap. Very straightforward. It's a capless system, so you're just going to insert your fuel hose, click it, lock it back into place. Now, when it comes down to fuel quality, minimum manufacturer's recommendation is just your regular 87 octane. So regular fuel, you're going to notice a little bit of a performance boost if you go to the 89 or the 91, but really it's not necessary inside of these vehicles. When it comes down to towing inside of the Escape, you're going to have different towing capacities. The hybrids are going to have a 1,500 pound towing capacity, while the 1.5 liter is going to max out at 2,000 pounds, and the 2-liter turbo is going to max out at 3,500 pounds. I do recommend getting the tow package directly from the factory for a few reasons. One of the big ones is that it's molded in, it looks a lot aesthetically pleasing, but the towing capacity, because if you just do an aftermarket receiver, your towing capacity essentially gets cut in half. So if you're looking for a little bit more of a towing capacity, definitely get the tow package from the factory. Now, looking at some standard technology inside of the vehicle, as you can see there, we do have our backup camera, and very similar across the Ford lineup, we're going to at least have our blind spot system as well as our lane keeping system, so lane keeping and lane centering. Now, one thing to note, the reverse sensing system here is not going to be standard across the entire Edge lineup. We do have to be in specific trims in order to get that standard, but it is available optional along the entire lineup. When it comes down to filling up fuel inside of the vehicle, so as you can see there, we do have a little gas cover there, and it's a capless system, so just insert your fuel hose, fill up, and when you're good to go, you're just going to close the door, click it to lock it back into place. When it comes down to fuel quality, minimum manufacturer's recommendation is just regular 87 octane, so your regular 87 gas. Now, when it comes to the horsepower and the torque specs that we were talking about earlier, that's achieved using a premium fuel. Do you need to use a premium fuel? Absolutely not, but you're going to notice about a 10% difference in the performance by using either an 89 or ideally a 91 octane. When it comes down to towing inside of the Edge, whether you look at the 2-liter turbo or the 2.7-liter turbo, they're both rated for the same towing capacity. Both vehicles are going to be able to pull up to 3,500 pounds if you get the tow package directly from the factory. So definitely recommend, if you're ever considering towing, could you do an aftermarket hitch? Absolutely. If you're really only using it for a bike rack, carrier, etc., you could absolutely do that. But getting it from the factory, 3,500 pound towing capacity, doing an aftermarket, you're going to be closer to about 1,500 pounds. So definitely something to take into account. When it comes down to the liftgate in the Escape, so a couple things to take into account. Depending on the trim level that you're looking at, you're either going to get a manual liftgate, you're going to get a power one, or you're going to get a foot-activated liftgate. So on the Escape lineup, the S and the SE are going to be manual, the SEL is going to be power, and then the Titanium is going to be a foot-activated power liftgate. So regardless of whatever trim you look at, you've got basics of being able to open it up roughly the same way. So if we look just underneath the C in Escape, we drop down, so right underneath where the license would be, there's a little button there. So we can press that button. If you're power in the SEL or the Titanium, it's automatically going to lift up. And then if you're manual inside of the S or the SE, all you're going to do is click that in order to unlock, and then you're just going to manually lift it up instead. Let's have a peek inside. Now, cargo dimensions are going to be showing up on the Escape, so as you can see there, we have a nice amount of width, depth, and height inside of it. Now, one thing to note, the second row in the Escape, we can actually slide that seat forward a little bit so we can get a couple more inches of space without having to fold those seats down. Okay, now let's compare that to when we have the seats folded down. So as you can see, we've got a lot more depth inside of the vehicle. So if you need to, you've got the ability to fold it out. It's a 60-40 split, so 60% driver, 40% passenger side. So you'd have the ability to fold each one down individually if you need to. And don't forget, we also have the ability to slide that seat forward if we need a little bit of extra space without actually folding the seats down. Taking a look at the back of the vehicle. So this is going to be standard across the Escape lineup. As you can see there, we do have a cigarette lighter adapter, and we've got our standard cover along the back there. Now we would have the option for a thermoplastic rubber tray instead. So if you wanted to have a rubber tray in the back there instead, you've got the capabilities to do that. But underneath, as you can see there, we do have our mini spare tire. We've got our jack, our spigot, as well as a little bit of storage space along the sides. When it comes down to the liftgate inside of the Edge, so in the SE version of the vehicle, it's going to be a manual liftgate. When you get into the SEL, it's going to be power. In the Titanium and the ST, you're going to have a foot-activated liftgate instead. So we're actually in the ST line, which essentially is a prettied up SEL. It's got all the functionality in the form of the SEL, but it's got the look of the ST. So looking at the liftgate, very similar to the Escape, there's a button right underneath. All we would do is push that button, and if you've got power, it's automatically going to lift up from there. If you're in one of the other trim levels, so the foot activated, all you do is just swipe your foot underneath, or if you're manual, you're just going to unlock using that same button, and then you just manually lift up instead. Let's have a peek inside. Right. So as you can see there, we do have quite a little bit of depth inside of the vehicle. So this is going to be a little bit different than the Escape because it's going to be pushed back a little bit more, which means that we've got a little bit more storage space. So it is a little bit of a wider vehicle at the end of the day. You're going to get more space in between both sides as well. But as you can see, plenty of cargo space inside of this vehicle. You know, let's compare that when that second row is folded down. So similar to on the Escape side of things, so we've got a 60-40 split, so 60% driver side, 40% passenger. So if we need to fold one seat down over the other, we've got the capabilities to easily do that. Taking a look along the backhand side here, so a few things to point out. If we're in the SE version of the vehicle, it's going to be a manual up and down. Looking at the SEL and above, as you can see there, we do have power down, so it's going to be power down and manual up. So all we would have to do is either press or hold the left or the right side, and it's going to drop those seats down for us. We will have this 12-volt adapter there regardless, and along the right-hand side, so not too much along that side, as you can see there, we've got a little bit of storage space along the top and the bottom. Now we do also have the ability to add in a cargo shade, so a privacy shade if we want to. And then this is going to be just our regular carpet liner along the back. We do have the option for a thermoplastic rubber tray in the back there instead. Lifting this up, as you can see, we do have our mini spare tire. We've got our spigot. The jack is actually just underneath the tire there. And we've got a lot of storage along both sides there as well. So nice to know that we can store a few extra things if we need to. When it comes down to second row spacing inside of the Escape, so a couple things to take into account. Now, I'm 6 feet tall. I've got the driver's seat set up for somebody who's 6 feet tall. I still have plenty of knee room, plenty of foot room. Up overhead, I've got about 2.5, almost 3 inches of headspace. Now, one thing to note, now, this specific one does not have the sunroof. So if you had the sunroof, you're going to be losing a couple inches of headspace. So if you've got some taller people, just know that you might have to either get them to sit in the front seat, or you might need to look at the edge as an option instead. And one of the nice things about the Escape is that the second row seats are actually adjustable. So we've got the ability, there's a little lever in between our legs. We can crank that up and slide the seat forwards or backwards as we'd like to. And then you can just release it in order to lock it into place. So that's beneficial if you need a couple extra inches in the cargo, so in the trunk space, without having to fold these seats down. When it comes down to some back row features, so inside of the Escape, we're going to have a pocket on the passenger side. We're not going to have one on the driver's side on any trim level. As we look down, this is going to be the same across the trim. As you can see there, we do have a few USB ports, so our USB and our USB-C. Now, depending on what version of the vehicle you're in, you might get cup holders, you might not. So if you're in the S or the SE trim level of the vehicle, you will not have these cup holders in the second row. The SEL and the Titanium will have them available. Now, one thing to note is that because we're in the SEL version of the vehicle, we do have this, it's called ActiveX seating material. It's essentially a pleather seat. When you look at the S or the SE, you're going to have a cloth seat instead, and then in the titanium, it's going to be a true leather seat. Now, when it comes down to second row spacing inside of the Edge, so I've got the driver's seat set up for somebody who's 6 feet tall. I'm 6 feet tall. I've got a boatload of knee room. I've got a bunch of foot room as well, which is great. Now, when it comes down to head space, I've got about 1.5 inches maybe of headroom up ahead. So this one does have the twin panel sunroof on there, so definitely something to consider. If you need something with a little bit more head space, you might have to look at one that doesn't have the sunroof, or just get the taller people to sit in the front seat instead. Now, one thing that's different inside of the Edge compared to the Escape is that this second row essentially is locked into place. So we don't have the ability to slide the seat forwards and backwards the same way that we would inside of the Escape. Now, taking a peek at some few standard things, we've got some pockets along both sides. And moving down here, so let's take a peek, and as you can see there, we've got a little storage area. We've got a few USB ports, so our USB and our USB-C, as well as a built-in inverter. So if you need to plug in a traditional wall outlet, we've got the ability to easily do that. Now, one thing to note, depending on the trim level of the vehicle that you're in, you may or you may not have heated seats. Those buttons would just be along the side there. So we're in the ST line, which is essentially just an SEL. When we look at the titanium or the ST, we would have the ability to have heated seats instead. Next up, taking a peek at the actual seat itself. So this is the way that the seat's going to look when we get into the ST line of the vehicle. So we've got a little bit of a split between that cloth versus the leather. Now, one thing to note, when we're in the SEL version, we're going to have ActiveX seating material, which is essentially a pleather seat. When we get into the SE, it's going to strictly be cloth. When it comes down to the titanium, it's going to be a true leather. And then in the ST version, the true ST version, we're going to have a similar style seat to that vehicle as well. Now, one thing to note, we do have cup holders that are available there, so we can just pop those down and we can just lift it up in order to lock it back into place. Now, taking a peek along the driver's side door, so we do have the ability to get inside of the vehicle using a 5-digit number on the outside. It's not available in all trim levels. The trims that it's available on are going to show up down below. But as we hop on the inside there, so a few things that are going to be standard there. So as you can see, as we start to move along the side, we've got our unlock lock button, we've got our door handle, the ability to kill off power to the rear windows, adjust our side view mirrors, and then control our windows as well. Now, depending on the trim level that you're on, you also may have an upgraded Bang & Olufsen sound system, so that is available there as an option. Now, so things that are going to be standard along the left-hand side of the steering wheel, when we're in the hybrid, we're going to have a locking gas cap. If you're not in the hybrid, this button won't be there. This button is going to be for the trunk release. Now, that's going to be for the power one. So if you're in the SEL or the titanium, you're going to see this button because we've got a power liftgate. Selector switch is going to be the same across the trim level, so we've got the ability to adjust what's going on with our running lamps. Honestly, the big ones to look at are either going to be this 0, so the off button, or the A, so the auto. That's automatically going to flip you between the daytime or the nighttime running lamps. These two buttons are going to be the dimmer switch for that middle screen, so whether or not that one's darker or brighter, you've got the ability to control that. And then if the vehicle is equipped with fog lamps, we'd be able to toggle them on or off from there. Taking a peek at the driver's seat. So depending on the model of the vehicle that you're in, so if you're in the SEL or the titanium, you're going to have a power adjustable driver's seat. The steering wheel itself is going to be telescopic and it's manual across the entire lineup. So we can pull that steering wheel in and out, we can go up and down with it. Once you've got that perfect position, you're just going to crank this lever up, lock it back into place, and you're set to go. All right, taking a look. Now, this is going to be the standard dash inside of the Escape. So if you're in the SEL version of the vehicle, we've got the option for a fully digital one. It's going to be fully digital inside of the titanium trim level of the vehicle as well. Now, depending on the features and functions that you get and the options that you add on, the buttons along the side are going to be different because this one has got the adaptive cruise control package. So we've got the Ford Copilot 360 Plus package, which is going to give us adaptive cruise control as well as factory navigation. So we can start the vehicle up there. That's going to bring things to life. Now, one thing to note, this is the hybrid version of the vehicle, so if you were in just the regular gas engine, this would look slightly different. So we wouldn't have the battery along the side there, that would just be the tachometer instead, but we would have the speedometer along the right-hand side. Looking at the actual steering wheel buttons, some of these are going to be very similar across the Escape lineup, so we've got the ability to increase or decrease our volume. We can mute out as necessary. Along the right-hand side, this is going to be the control for that middle cluster screen there. So we've got the ability to move up and down as necessary. We've got the ability to either answer or hang up a phone call. We can skip between active songs or radio stations. This next one is going to be for our voice command. So we've got the ability to press that if we want to. We can either change radio stations, we can make phone calls, or if our vehicle was connected with navigation, so if it had navigation on there, we would have the ability to navigate using our voice by pressing that steering wheel button there, which is really nice. Now, one thing to note is that if you get an Escape that doesn't have factory navigation. One of the nice things about the Escape lineup across the entire lineup is that we do have Sync 3, which gives us the ability to use Apple CarPlay and Android Auto directly through this middle screen, which means that we can use things like Waze, Google Maps, or Apple Maps directly through this screen, which is incredible. Some basic settings that are going to be standard across the vehicle lineup. We've got some driver assistance settings. So driver assistance, we've got at least cruise control, but when we're in the Copilot 360 Plus package, we're going to have the adaptive as well as the intelligent cruise. Lane keeping system works 3 different ways, and it's going to be the same on the Escape, the Edge, the Explorer, etc. So lane keeping modes, the first one is an alert. So if we start to veer over into a lane without signaling, we're going to get a little bit of a steering wheel shake, almost as if we're running over rumble pavement. The aid is actually going to recenter us and pull us back into our lane, and then the alert and the aid are going to do both. So we'll get a little bit of a steering wheel shake, and then it'll recenter us and pull us back into our lane. We've got pre-collision assist, so the vehicle essentially, if it senses a potential collision, it's automatically going to brake for us, and that's going to be the same across the entire Escape lineup. We've got our blind spot system. So blind spot system lets us know if anybody's entered the blind spot on either side of the vehicle. We can just kind of make out that little orange light that's bleeping there. So that's going to let us know if anybody's entered the blind spot on either side. And we've also got our cross traffic alert, driver alert, and a few other advanced settings. If you're looking for more of an in-depth look into this Sync 3 system and how all of this stuff actually works, including the steering wheel, drop down in the description below because I've put together a fully comprehensive video about that. But looking at the Escape, as we start to move down the center stack, we've got our voice control, our volume control. We can turn the audio on or off. We can tune this way, but honestly, this is probably the least effective way of tuning. Your best bet is just to use your voice by using that voice command on the steering wheel. We can change between songs, we can play and pause. We can turn the screen off if we want a calming one. We can go to a blank, or we can bring it back to life again. Moving down, we've got our 4-way blinkers, and we've also got some basic climate control settings. Heated seats are going to be available there as well. Heated steering wheel is going to depend on the package that you've got. So depending on if you're in the SEL or the Titanium, you will have that. You'll have dual zone climate control there as well. And as we start to move down, as you can see there, we do have a 12-volt adapter, so traditional cigarette lighter adapter, a few USB ports, so our USB and our USB-C, and we do have the option for a wireless charging pad. Moving down, we've got our selector switch to move between park, reverse, neutral, drive, or our low gear. Down a bit more, we've got our parking brake. We've also got our auto hold setting. We've got the ability to change out different drive modes. We've got our normal, eco, sport, slippery, deep snow and sand, back to our normal mode again. So series of different modes. Now, one thing to note is that when we are in the Escape Titanium, we will also have park assist, and those buttons are essentially just going to be along the side there instead. So we're going to have a few different buttons that are going to be available inside of those higher trim levels. We do have an armrest, and that's going to be standard across the Escape trim levels. And as you can see there, we do have a little bit of storage. We've got a pen holder along the side as well as along the top. As we start to move up overhead, so a few things to point out. As you can see there, we do have our visor, and it is vanity lights there as well. And we can just crank this off to the side if we need to block some sun out. Click it, lock it back up into place. And as you can see there, we've got our cabin control lighting. Now this mirror, it's not auto dimming across the lineup. So it's going to be dependent on the trim level that you've got and the packages that you've got inside of your vehicle. As we look up overhead, we do have our sunglasses holder. That's going to be standard. And then if we had a sunroof, so as I mentioned, this one doesn't, but if we had the sunroof, we would have the sunroof controls there as well. So we'd have the ability to open up a sunshade, and we can open and close as necessary. Now, taking a peek at the driver's side door, so as you can see there, we do have the ability to get inside of it just using a 5-digit factory number, very similar to what we saw in the Escape, available on certain trim levels. Now, as we hop inside, so a few things to note along the driver's door. So as you can see there, we've got our unlock and our lock buttons. We've got the ability to kill off power to those rear windows. We've got the ability to adjust our side view mirrors, roll our windows up and down. Now, as I mentioned, this is the ST line of the vehicle. So as you can see there, we do have that ST line badging along the side. So very, very nice look. Just to the left-hand side there, so we've got the ability to turn our fog lamps on or off, and we've got the ability to figure out what's going on with our running lamps. Honestly, the only two settings that I really recommend you worry about are all the way to the left, which is going to be off, or all the way to the right, which is our auto setting. So that's going to automatically flip us between the daytime or the nighttime running lamps. We can adjust the screen brightness there, so that's going to be the screen brightness for the instrument cluster. We've got the ability to turn our traction control system on or off, and this one is going to show up depending on what trim level of the vehicle you've got, because that's going to be a button in order to open up our power liftgate. Moving down, we've got easy access to our fuse panel, and we've also got the ability to open up our hood if we need to. Now, when it comes down to the SEL, the ST line, the ST, and the Titanium, they're all going to have a power adjustable driver's seat and a power adjustable passenger seat. The SE is going to be a different story, so we're going to have a manual passenger seat instead. So we've got the ability to move the seat forwards, backwards, up and down. We can move our backrest as well. When it comes down to the actual steering wheel itself, so the steering wheel, we've got the ability to manually adjust. It will come power adjustable if you're in some of those higher trim levels, but if you're not power, just in between our legs, and it's telescopic across the entire lineup. So we can go in and out, we can go up and down, and then we can easily just lock it back into place again. Next up, taking a peek at the steering wheel. So this is the ST line of the vehicle. So we've got some nice unique red stitching along the side. That's going to be the same in the ST version of the vehicle. In the SEL, in the titanium, it's going to look slightly different, but you're going to have a lot of the same features and functionalities. So when we do get the Copilot 360 Plus package, or if you're in the higher trim levels, you will have the adaptive cruise control system. So we've got the ability to essentially just set it and forget it for a cruise. We've got the ability to adjust what's going on that left screen. This is going to give us the ability to adjust what's going on that right screen. Moving down, we've got the ability to change between songs, radio stations. We can either answer or hang up on a phone call. We can adjust our volume, we can mute, or we've got the ability to use our voice for a few different things. So we've got the ability to navigate, we can change radio stations, or we can make a phone call by using our voice just by pressing that button along the steering wheel. Now, one thing to note, as we can look along the top there, we've got the ability to toggle our lane keeping system on or off. Lane keeping system works 3 different ways, so it's either going to give us a steering wheel shake if we start to veer over into a lane without signaling, or it's actually going to take over the steering wheel, recenter us, and pull us back into our lane. Now, this is actually new for the 2021 model year, so we are now on Sync 4 inside of the Edge. So this is just going to be a basic look at the screen. If you're looking for that more full walk around, check down in the description below because I've put together a comprehensive video about how this works. Now, one thing to note is that if your vehicle does not have factory navigation, don't worry about it because you do have the ability to use Android Auto and Apple CarPlay directly through this middle screen. So you'll be able to use Waze, Google Maps, or Apple Maps, and one of the nice things is that we can connect to Android Auto and Apple CarPlay wirelessly now inside of the Edge. So that's a really cool benefit. Up along the top there, we've got some basic settings, so sound, radio, phone list, general settings, view, and a number of other things. Voice control is great because it does give us the ability to make phone calls. We can change the radio station. We can navigate directly using our voice. We can get rid of that. We've got a hot button to pull up a few other things, so we've got some navigation there. So this specific one does have factory navigation. Now, one thing to note about the factory navigation inside of the Edge for the 2021 model year is that you do have 3 years of connected service. So that's going to be your traffic, your live traffic alerts, weather, things like that. After the 3 years, it does require a subscription. But as I mentioned, you do have the ability to use Google Maps, Apple Maps, or Waze directly through this middle screen instead. As we start to move down a little bit, so we do have our climate control settings, which are now on this digital screen instead. So we've got dual zone climate control. We can figure out what's happening with our cabin temperature, which is great. We can drop that back down. And we've also got the ability to turn on our heated seats for the driver's side, heated seat for the passenger, and our heated steering wheel. Now, one thing to note, if you're in the higher trim levels of the vehicle, you're going to have heated and cooled front seats. So it's really nice to know that we've got the ability to add that on if we'd like to. As we start to move down the center stack, we've got the ability to adjust our volume. We can tune. Honestly, this is probably going to be the least effective method of tuning. Your best bet is just to change the station using your voice instead. We've got the ability to adjust some basic settings. We've got the ability to look at our reverse camera. And we've got the ability to change between stations. We can play or pause from there. As we start to move down, so the wireless charging pad there is available as an option on some of the trim levels. We've got the ability to plug in a few things. We've got our USB and our USB-C. Moving down a tiny little bit more, so as you can see there's a really nice look. So you can just kind of make it, but it's like a faux carbon fiber look inside of this. So this is the ST line of the vehicle. It would be an aluminum, so a different style look if you were to look at other trim levels instead. But as you can see there, we do have our park, reverse, neutral, drive, and then our sport mode. Moving down a little bit more, we've got our parking brake and we've got our auto start stop. So we've got the ability to turn that system off if we really, really don't like it. Now, one thing to note is that it's not going to be permanently off. We do have to turn that on and off every single time we get inside of the vehicle and turn the engine off. As we start to move down, so as you can see there, we've got a little storage tray that we can easily pop out. And looking down, we've got a 12-volt adapter, so we can plug in a traditional cigarette lighter adapter there if we need to, and back down in order to lock it into place. As we start to move up overhead, so we do have optional home link there. Again, depending on the trim level that you're on, we can move this out and swing it out to the side there. And the vanity mirror itself actually does have those lights. Up overhead there, so we do have an auto dimming mirror that is available on some of the trim levels. Up ahead, we've got our basic cabin control lighting. We've got the ability to turn off our cabin lights as well, whether the door's open or closed. Now, this specific one does have the panoramic roof, so really, really nice, and it does open things up very, very well inside of this thing. But a couple things to note, we've got the ability to open or close our shade. We can open and close the window, or we can just do a little bit of a bump up instead. So if we want to just create a little vent, we've got the capability to easily do that. Well, folks, that was a look at the Edge versus the Escape. What did you think? From a sizing perspective, what do you think would make sense for you? If you have any questions, drop down in the comment section below and let me know. But until I see you next time, make sure you stay safe.